I rise today in opposition to H.R. 3684. And here we are again. It's Groundhog Day for infrastructure on the floor this week. Exactly 1 year ago, I stood here as we took up the majority's first version of its My Way or the Highway bill. And that bill, just like today's, was developed without working with Republican members, and it passed mostly along party lines. And then the bill died, forcing Congress to pass a 1-year short-term extension, something that we all know is extremely costly, and it's detrimental to our state's ability to plan and carry out the needed improvements that they need. Unfortunately, the Speaker has ignored the obvious lesson that successful legislating is through partnership. It's not through partisanship. And as a result, today's bill is even worse than last year's failed effort. This bill is completely unpaid for. It's completely unpaid for, something that I've never seen in a highway bill in my 2 decades here in Congress. It's all deficit spending that's going to continue driving up what is already the highest inflation rate since 2008. Mr. Speaker, it didn't have to be this way. Earlier this year, our committee's leaders met with the president, and we made it clear that Republicans wanted to be a part of a bipartisan bill. And I have no doubt that we could have compromised in a way that met many of the majority's goals while still including Republicans' priorities from our own proposal. Far from being impossible, the Senate committees have managed to do just that. They found common ground on common sense, project streamlining, on flexibility for our state and local partners, and equitable treatment for rural America. However, in order to appease the progressives in their party, the majority showed no willingness to meet us anywhere in the middle. Instead, they moved their bill even further to the left than the one from last year. And ironically, even that won't be enough, as Speaker Pelosi right now is preparing another partisan effort that's going to completely overshadow this bill by pushing through a multi-trillion-dollar tax and spend plan using budget reconciliation. Now, under this bill, if you think about it, under this bill, and I'll just walk through a few of the things that, a very few of the things that are wrong. 1 out of every $2 on this bill is tied up in the Green New Deal agenda. This bill eliminates a ban on spending transit dollars to fund art at train stations or transit stations. It's insane given that infrastructure needs, given the needs that we have in this country. This bill is going to waste critical infrastructure resources on buying paintings and sculptures for transit stations. This bill significantly increases the size of government. It creates 41 new programs. And as I mentioned, this bill provides no regulatory reform to make project delivery more efficient and less wasteful. And this bill ties the hands of states that need to build new roads and new capacity. Even if that's their most critical need, it still ties their hands. And these are just a few of the examples why this bill is bad for the country, and I can go on and on and on and on and on. This partisanship was absolutely unnecessary, and it's sad. The Senate EPW and the Senate Commerce Committee have overwhelmingly approved their own pieces of surface reauthorization. The Senate has also approved a bipartisan $35 billion water infrastructure plan. But instead of following the example or using the bipartisan agreement we had on clean water infrastructure that we agreed to last Congress as the framework, the majority again chose to walk away from bipartisanship. This bill now includes more than $170 billion for drinking water and wastewater infrastructure, which is completely unrealistic, and it's out of touch with the Senate's bill and House Republicans. In fact, everything about this bill is out of touch. Although the president currently supports a bipartisan infrastructure framework in the Senate, progressives in Congress have already declared that that Senate proposal, is dead on arrival without first getting their massive partisan wish list. If they don't get it, they have stated that. The Speaker and the far left are trying to hold infrastructure hostage in order to get their $6 trillion in other priorities through budget reconciliation. While the other side says that all the spending in today's bill is supposed to transform our transportation system, it's certainly going to change one thing in transportation, and that's your gas prices. More deficit spending is only going to further fuel inflation, and it's going to raise the price of not only gas, but food and every other necessity that's needed. Voting for this bill is an implicit endorsement of the Speaker's overall strategy to ram through a $6 trillion tax and spend reconciliation package, and I encourage members to vote against this bill and against this partisan process. And with that, I would reserve the balance. In closing, this bill basically lets the American people down. This is a missed opportunity for partnership, a chance to come together and pass a bill that addresses the real infrastructure needs of all of our communities, from the largest cities right down to our most rural areas. Members on the other side have said that they don't want another traditional highway bill, but we can't abandon our roads and bridges just to say we want something new. Our core infrastructure has become traditional because Americans depend on it to work and to travel and to live. And that's why every highway bill that has become law for at least the last 3 decades has done so based on bipartisanship. Democrats and Republicans sitting down together with their priorities and putting in the work to find common ground that both sides can support. We could have found common ground and achieved many of the goals while addressing Republican priorities as well. That's what the American people want us to do, and that's what the president at least said that he wanted, and that's what the Speaker actually said she wanted our committees to do. But the process that led us here didn't reflect any of those calls to unity. What's even more frustrating is that we did have a bipartisan agreement in place, at least part of it, ready to take up again, and that was the wastewater section of this bill. But the majority, again, blatantly rejected the chance to work together on another infrastructure issue that has been and should continue to be bipartisan. This bill only reflects the majority's one-size-fits-all version for what they think our infrastructure should look like. It doesn't reflect the realities of what actually addresses the needs of our communities. So today I'm going to ask my colleagues to consider this. Does this help your communities? Do you consider art to be infrastructure? Do you feel good about spending $550 billion on a highway bill that restricts communities from building highways? And most importantly, can you ignore the reality of spending more than $715 billion with no pay-fors? No pay-fors, no revenue title, just piling more debt onto our children's future and driving up inflation. For me, that answer is real simple. It's no. What's worse, progressives are not going to let this bill or any real infrastructure bill become law unless they get their $6 trillion partisan wish list. They're holding infrastructure hostage to achieve their socialist tax and spend agenda. Madam Speaker, I would urge my colleagues to oppose this bill and the majority's partisan process, and with that, I yield back.